Please be advised, viewer discretion is strongly recommended. None of the content presented here has been exaggerated or taken out of context. What you are about to hear includes the exact statements from the prosecution's closing arguments in the federal trial against Sean "Diddy" Combs. In today's video, you'll hear the prosecution team's final attempt to persuade the jury, highlighting key evidence, testimonies, and critical moments from the trial. Some language has been censored to comply with YouTube's guidelines. This is a voiced-over reading of real courtroom dialogue, based on live reporting from courtroom journalist Inner City Press on X.com. All parties are presumed innocent until proven guilty. Listen at your own discretion. Today in the Diddy trial, the prosecution began their closing arguments, making their final push to convince the jury that Sean "Diddy" Combs is guilty. Over the last few weeks, you've learned that Sean Combs is the leader of a criminal organization. He doesn't take no for an answer. He's into kidnapping, arson, forced labor, bribery of a security officer, and the brutal crimes of the sex trafficking. Consider two moments. March 2016 at the Intercontinental Hotel. The defendant got violent with Cassie. You saw what happened. He dragged her back to the freak-off. 2024 at Jane's house. The defendant choked and hit her. She ran, couldn't get away. These are chapters in the same book. The defendant counted on silence and shame. He thought that his fame and wealth and power put him above the law. Over the last 7 weeks, you've heard how he used his staff to promote his power. No one could stop him. We'll talk about RICO, including sex trafficking and transportation for prostitution, which are also separately charged as standalone crimes. You may have heard of racketeers. When someone commits crime as part of a group, they are more dangerous. A group of people whose purpose was to serve and protect the defendant. It's his kingdom. Everyone was there to serve him, fulfilling all of his desires, including his sexual desires. We need to show at least 2 racketeering crimes. The defendant was the head of the Combs enterprise. There was an inner circle, his chief of staff and his bodyguards. The names changed, but the roles remained the same. You've heard about KK, Combs' right brain. She lived in 2-star. She communicated with the defendant's girlfriends. His security, you heard their names. D-Rock, Bonds, Rube, Uncle Paulie, Fahim. They were armed and ready. Remember the incident at the diner with Suge Knight? David James told you Combs had guns. In the search, law enforcement found guns, including a rifle with the serial number defaced in L.A., 2 AR-15s with their serial numbers cut out in the defendant's closet. You also have the rotating cast of assistants paid by the defendant's business. Brendan Paul said he made $100,000 a year. KK made 6 times that. When your boss asks you to buy drugs, you're committing a crime. When you kidnap someone or locked his girlfriend in a hotel room after your boss stomped on his face, it's a crime. The law does not require us to know that they like committing these crimes. You saw KK chiding the defendant to not be so reckless, but she got him cash, drugs. She was a member of the enterprise. It impacted interstate commerce. Minimal is fine. Combs knowingly became a member. He was the boss. He was the through line. The racketeering acts, distribution of drugs, kidnapping, arson, bribery, facilitating trafficking of Cassie and Jane, forced labor, travel for commercial cover-up. You only need to find that someone would commit 2 acts in any of these categories. It could be 2 acts of drug distribution, 1 kidnapping, just 2. You have far more than 2. Let's start with drugs, an essential ingredient of freak-offs. The most involved were D-Rock, KK, and Fahim, but others helped keep the drug supply high. We are not talking about marijuana, but what Brendan Paul called hard drugs. There are stipulations of the drugs found in the searches: cocaine, meth, ketamine, a dissociative drug, GHB, mushrooms, Molly, 2C, a combination dyed pink. It's 1305 and 1306. The quantities are not relevant. It's not an element of this crime. Distribution does not require a sale. You know the names of the drug dealers by now. Guido, One Stop, Baby Girl. Jane told you that on 2 occasions she was told to bring drugs when she flew to meet him. She coordinated with KK. It's corroborated by text messages. KK told Jane to swing by Mapleton to pick up the Guido package. He was called during hotel nights. So, we know what the Guido package was. More equity. The security team knew what it was. Guido texted Fahim. Puff has a $450 balance with me. Brendan Paul asked for $780 for personal Gucci items. That is, hard drugs. Drugs were distributed. It doesn't matter he wasn't buying kilos or selling them. Personal use is just a distraction. They bought and distributed to people around him. Cassie used drugs at every freak-off supplied by the defendant. He introduced Jane to drugs, gave them to her at all but one hotel night. He gave drugs to Carrie Morgan and Bona Bonalyn. He made Brendan Paul try Tusi to see if it was good. D-Rock would text, "One stop, need to see someone for bro," that is, the defendant. Guido asked Fahim to cover the defendant's drug debt. KK knew he was distributing drugs to the woman for the Wild King nights. Jane told KK she was having a bad come-down. KK gives pro tips how to deal with it. Plain and simple, this is distribution. How about kidnappings? They committed them under both California and New York law. Consider Cassie. Bond made her stay put. The defendant called Cassie a slut. He stopped on her face. She was disfigured. Roger Bonds caught her and brought her back. The defendant made her go to the London hotel on Sunset, so no one saw her. She wanted to go home to her mom. But no. It's clear Cassie did not consent to staying in the London hotel. David James testified the defendant demanded to see his search history. If he had posted that the defendant assaulted Cassie in the club, then there's Capricorn Clark. They made her take a lie detector test for days in an empty office building in Manhattan. This was in 2004. She was holding expensive jewelry that went missing. Uncle Paulie took her to the future HQ of Bad Boy. She was tested for 5 lies. The man administering the test told her if she failed, she'd end up in the East River. In Central Park, the defendant told her if anything happened, he'd have to kill her. David James remembers this. He was tested too, to get the rat out of the team. In December 2011, Rube helped the defendant kidnap Capricorn Clark. It started on December 22, 2011. The defendant banged on Capricorn's door with a gun. He was out for revenge. He barked an order at Capricorn. "Get dressed, we're gonna kill Cootie." They drove to Kid Cootie's house. The defendant had a gun in his lap. This was kidnapping. He moved her a substantial distance. The defendant said he wouldn't let her told until she brought him Cassie, who he kicked when she arrived, into fetal position. Cassie, who was with Kid Cootie that morning, testified with this. The officer who responded to the 911 call, he saw a black Escalade registered to Bad Boy. Then, on January 12, 2012, the defendant had Kid Cootie's car set on fire, arson. Someone cut a hole in the roof of Kid Cootie's car and dropped in a Molotov cocktail. We're not suggesting the defendant cut the hole. He didn't even buy his own soup. You heard the voice notes. He said he was going to blow up Kid Cootie's car. What are the odds? He says it and it happened. The coincidences just keep on coming. The defendant and Rube just happened to be there a few weeks before. Kid Cudi was driving the same Porsche the night of the trespass. What are the odds? Kid Cudi had conflicts with no one except the defendant. Then D-Rock brought Kid Cudi to the defendant, who was looking like a Marvel supervillain. Years later, the defendant apologizes to Kid Cudi. Then there's bribery, the 2016 video. The defendant was having a freak-off with Cassie and one of the escorts, Jules. Flores found the defendant sitting in a chair with what he called a devilish stare. In the room, he saw another man. The defendant tried to hand Flores a stack of money. It was his first attempt at a bribe that day. As Cassie leaves, Combs starts damage control. He called Cassie over a dozen times. The texts, "Call me, cops are here." He was just manipulating her. But the defendant knew he could be arrested. There was video of the assault. He went and banged on Cassie's door with a hammer. Neighbors were going to call the police. They did in fact go. Carrie Morgan had the LAPD card. KK suggests, say they had a fun drunk night. She calls and reaches Eddie Garcia. Eddie says no. Then KK shows up in person. He won't show her, but says off the record, it's bad. KK has the defendant call Eddie on his personal cell phone. Once Eddie says his boss will do it for $50,000, the defendant calls him, "Eddie, my angel." That's how he's saved in the cell phone. Eddie goes to deliver the USB. D-Rock and KK are there. The defendant counted out dollar by dollar the bribe. Eddie told you the security guard told him. He came up with the defendant. That was D-Rock. Eddie asks the defendant, "What if Cassie calls police?" So, the defendant knew. Eddie finds the ID of stand-in for Flores. NDAs are signed. Don't speak to anyone. Paying for silence is influencing testimony. In their opening, the defense suggested it was just about bad publicity. Police involvement would hurt him. The two are connected. The next racketeering predicate is trafficking. Defendants' inner circle assisted, whether they wanted to or not. Threats, drugs, lies, and illegal violence to make them have sex with escorts. This is not an attempt to criminalize dysfunctional relationships or personal sexual behavior. They did not want to have sex with strangers while the defendant did. They were covered in oil and sore, over and over again. We are not asking you to find that every hotel night or freak-off was sex trafficking, or even the majority. You only need to find the elements were met one time, one freak-off, that's it. He's guilty. But it was way more than once. Let's start with Jane. Turn off the public screens, consider the sobriety party, and in Jane's house. Let's start with the love bombing stage. Jane was head over heels. They traveled to the Caribbean. Dr. Hughes talked about this. She never met with any witness, but it was like she knew them. Love bombing is a tactic. He was grooming her. He gave Jane ecstasy. She fell to the ground convulsing. The defendant liked baby oil and red lights. Then introduced in May 2021, she wanted to please her partner. She was high. The defendant had a freak-off set up that very night. An escort came. Jane was excited by that first experience. She didn't realize she had opened Pandora's box. It became 90% of their relationship. For a while, she went along. Then she told him she wanted it to stop. There are texts about this. Jane wrote, "I wanted to do things outside these rooms, to travel with you." The defendant ignored Jane's discomfort. Those hotel nights were not about what Jane wanted. They were about what the defendant wanted to see. He decided how long. Jane said, if she was going to have sex with strange men, she should choose which. The defendant made her ask them for nude photos. These were not for her. When she asked to use condoms, the defendant was not happy. He was dismissive and condescending. She would try to have it go faster. He'd order her to slow down. It was about what he wanted. He dangled carrots. He gave her gifts and money. He lied to her repeatedly. She asked, "When are we doing a getaway?" He said they'd go on a yacht, but didn't. Here's what Jane wrote in her notes app. "I don't want to have you use me to fulfill your freaky wild desires in hotel rooms." He used his payment of her rent as leverage. The carrot turned into a stick. She wrote, "The threats and innuendo are non-stop." He paid for her veneers because he didn't like her teeth, then said, "Look at the roof over her head and your pretty mouth and teeth." He wanted the all-star party, set with 3 men. She sent him a photo of her blood. He sent this voice note, "I'm about to really disappear on you. I don't have no time for this baby girl. You got me on my job. You gotta get on your job." The message couldn't be clearer, not going to take no for an answer. After reading Cassie's lawsuit, Jane writes to the defendant, "I feel like I'm reading my own trauma. 2 of my birthdays you forced me." Jane wrote, "You gaslit me. It was sexual exploitation you framed as love for your sick fetishes." The defendant called her and tried to trick her into saying it was all consented to. He fed her a false narrative. Listen to this clip. He talked over her. Dr. Hughes told you how a victim is trauma bonded to her abuser. Jane often felt the defendant didn't listen to the truth. She said, Sean would say just to move on. He told her to charge him, that lawyers would be involved, to buy her silence. So she asked for $100,000 a year for her to move on. She thought it was reasonable, far less than Cassie. The defendant went ballistic. She refused to adopt her false narrative. You can read the text message. Jane wrote that the defendant was going to show her sex tapes to the father of her child. Then he reached out and told her to come see him in Miami. She makes it clear he doesn't want a hotel night. He says, "Okay." Despite his promise, he called an escort. Here are more threats about the rent. Jane writes, "I hate worrying about the rent. This is in 2024. It all culminated in June 2024. He assaulted her and forced her to perform or sex on an escort. This is sex trafficking. It was interstate, and the Astroglide crossed state lines. The defendant knew or recklessly disregarded that force. Threats of force, coercion, or fraud were used. Consenting once doesn't mean she consented every time. One time is enough. In 2023, he made Jane feel she'd have a proper NYC weekend, but invited escorts. Jane sent him another message. It's dark and sleazy, in fear of losing my home. His response, girl, stop. Then he FaceTimed her and told her about stopping in dinner. He lied. Look, public screen is still off for summary chat. He is also texting Paul Arthur as escort. Look at these messages. He is setting up a hotel night. When she is in the air, he tells her he has a surprise for her. She did not want it. That, before the plane even lands, is a completed act of sex trafficking. He tricked her. Then, under coercions, she calls Cabral to come to New York. In the next text, she says, in NYC, I knew you would pair me up with a random person. In the sobriety party, without drugs, she is so disgusted she vomits. She writes, I'm not a porn star, I'm not an animal, I need a break. The defendant responds, let's spend the day, no strangers. She replies, you'll love bomb me. He switches from carrot to stick, the house. He texts, are you going to let me into our house? 8 times. Then he said he was sick and needed her. She went and had sex with 3 different men without drugs. After vomit, he said, get back out there. 2024 in Jane's house. 3 months after Homeland Security agents searched the defendants' homes. They used Jane's house. He came there. They were supposed to have a fun date night. They drank and argued. She pushed his head into the counter.